All right, let's do differences between garden tractors and lawn tractors. Let's put this to bed because I know the debate rages on. Two people I know were just talking about it a couple days ago. Guess we'll start with a lawn tractor because that's what most people are gonna have. All right, typically lawn tractors are gonna have a smaller transmission with a center cap on the rear. So whether it's a hydro or a manual, it'll be a smaller unit. They're oftentimes interchangeable. I know many times where I've had tractors where the transmission crapped out and I was able to swap another one in very easily with 6 bolts. 6 bolts hold that thing in place and that whole thing will drop out of there. Lawn tractors typically have smaller decks. You can get a lawn tractor with one up to, I guess, I don't know how high they go. I've had one with a 46. I think I've seen ones with 48. I don't know if they go into the 50s. That's another thing. Typically in size, they're usually a little smaller. Garden tractor's chassis may be identical. It's bulked up by everything else. They typically have smaller fuel tanks. A lot of times, this one has a rear tank because it's a higher end lawn tractor with a bigger engine, so it's got the 3.5 gallon fuel tank. But a lot of times you'll have like a 1.5 gallon fuel tank right here, and the battery will be under the seat. Most lawn tractors have engines with 21 horse or less. Some of the older ones have 12 horse, but they're really not like this. All right, this is 670 cc, right? Something like that. A 12 horse is 465 cc. All right. What else? What else on a lawn tractor? Typically, you won't find the front steering is usually not as heavy duty, right? Most garden tractors will have a clock. On this one you can't see it, but on lawn tractors, the back end usually comes down flat like this. They both can use the same bagging system. The only difference like between this one and that one would be the one tube, or just the tubes coming to this piece. This piece of it would be this pretty much the same. However, they probably make it different for this unit because this one's made for that flat back. A bagger for this unit would probably have a curve to it, so it would stay flat to go up straight. Let's go to the garden tractor. It'll help us make the big distinctions immediately. Garden tractors, the big difference immediately off the bat is going to be your transmission. You see these rear wheels? See how they're 5-lug bolted on hubs? On garden tractors like this one, they're bolted on. The transmissions are substantially heavier duty, whether it's a manual or a hydro. Much bigger. This one's a GT 5000. I looked under there. It's pretty big. It's a hydro. I had a GT 6000 from the 90s, and that transmission was literally the size of a Hyundai Sonata from the time period transmission. That's how big the transmission on that thing was. I mean, it was huge. So that's one of the biggest things on a garden tractor that's different from a lawn tractor. Pulling capacity. These things are made to really work hard, okay? To be out there pulling rototillers, plowing, dirt, snow, all kinds of different things, okay? they typically have much bigger decks. As you can see, this has a 54-inch deck. It's humongous, right? Back ends on the garden tractors are usually at a curve like this. It's got something to do with the way they pull and tow. You know, see, there's hookups here for stuff. Garden tractors usually have much larger engines. Like, we're talking, this one says 22, but a lot of them will have 25, 26 horsepower engines. So they'll have much bigger engines. Okay, this one's a 22, that's a 21. So this one's a little bit bigger. You could tell because it needed more air. Okay, that's one of the reasons you could tell compared to that one. This is open. I think there was definitely still something in between here, but this needed more air for cooling. All right, what else on a garden tractor? You can see it's overall bigger and bulkier. Look at the difference in the steering. The main steering, I believe, is about the same, maybe a little bit thicker. Let's look. Cast iron. But look at the sway bar. Look at this thing. See how much thicker this thing is compared to your typical lawn tractor. It has this. I could take this off and bend this with my arms. That thing over there, you can't bend that. So steering is definitely a big thing on a garden tractor, at least a quality one. The steering is going to be substantially heavier duty. The front tires are also usually bigger, as you can see, compared to the front tires on that machine. So your rear rims and tires are bigger and they're bolt on, versus a garden tractor where they just slip on like the fronts. And these fronts, they're bigger, but they slip on. So no matter what, you can always get a garden tractor wheel off because it's bolted on, like a car. Lawn tractor, like this one, these tend to rust on and get frozen on there because over time moisture gets in there and it rusts the rim to the axle. All right. Any other major things? See, like this one doesn't even have an hour meter. I was gonna say most garden tractors would have the hour meter. There's no hour meter on this thing, but you can see they made them to have many different indicator lights. This is where a clock would have been. I'll have to check and see if it actually did have it, if it fell down. You can get them in manual and hydro. So yeah, it's got a much larger capacity fuel tank. This is a 5-gallon fuel tank. That one happens to be needing replacement, but it's 5-gallon capacity. This gas cap, this is no good. Seats bigger on this thing. It's just bulkier, you know, in general. So those are the main differences though. And I mean, it was made for this really big bumper, you know. All right, so that's the main differences between a garden tractor and a lawn tractor. The transmissions are much heavier duty and more substantial. They typically have larger engines. They typically will have larger decks because they can handle it. They're going to have rims and tires that are larger and the rears bolt on. And the rear ends usually come down at an angle and not, you know, straight down. Okay? On a regular lawn tractor. See, this is overkill for most lawn tractors. You don't even need an engine this big. I mean, it's good to have a V-twin versus single cylinder, especially now. But the ones back in the day, the 12-horse flathead, would have powered this machine just fine. Guarantee it. 42-inch deck, you don't need anything more than that. I've even heard people say it. You know, engines this size on these tractors tend to be overkill. But you see how there's no gap here? It needs less air to keep it cool. Alright. Steering in general would be, if I didn't mention it, I mentioned the front axle, but the steering system in general might be a little bit heavier duty as well. Had a bigger seat, but that's nothing. Yeah, seats are swappable. The seat for this one's downstairs drying, the glue's drying. But yeah, smaller decks, much smaller transmission. Engines are typically smaller. Smaller rims and tires. And then, you know, what that all boils down to is less torque, less pulling power, less strength. You know, oh yeah, and the front steering. Front steering on this one is nowhere near what that other one is like. You know, not a less capacity fuel tank. They can both have baggers. This one has a bagger. That one can have a bagger. And that's it. That's the main differences. This one, oh yeah, lawn tractors, some of the base ones will have manual PTOs where, you know, it's a lever to engage the blades, not electric. This one happens to have an electric PTO. That's just the way it worked out. This one has an electric PTO. Most garden tractors are going to have an electric PTO. The machines with larger engines typically have an independent choke, which is a good thing because you can start the engine at like middle throttle, not full throttle, because they say it's not good to start an engine at full swing. So that's good. That's a good thing on these. You can start the engine at like middle throttle and not full throttle, because when you first start an engine, especially a splash lube, any engine really, but especially a splash lube engine at full swing, it's not lubricated yet. It's got to start picking up the oil. So you start an engine and it hasn't been, you know, the oil hasn't warmed up yet and it hasn't started splashing the oil. That initial, at least 5-10 seconds, but that initial 30 seconds to a minute, the oil is warming up. It's lubricating. So that engine's not lubricated yet. So when you start an engine that does not have a manual choke, right, it has the automatic choke where you have to go all the way to the top to get choke, and then the engine's at full swing, it's bad for the engine because it's not lubricating at first. Definitely true on a splash lube, probably also true on the pressure lube, because the oil's not warmed up. It hasn't been lubricated yet, so everything's dry. So you're starting the engine and you're already on full 3600 RPM or whatever it's set at, and it hasn't had time to lubricate yet. That's bad for the engine life. It's recommended to put in choke and put the throttle at halfway and then start it. It's easier on the engine. You know what I mean? It's not going at full swing and it's giving it time to lubricate. And then once it gets warmed up, then you can go all the way up, no problem. So that was one downfall to the way they did that, where they put the choke on the ones that don't have an independent choke, where the choke is up here, right above full throttle, and then you bring it down and you're immediately in full throttle, that's bad. The only way you can try to avoid that, for those who are mindful of it, is you're in choke and you immediately go to middle throttle. And you let it warm up for a minute. Once it's warmed up, you can go up to full throttle, no problem. But that's hard on an engine. That's hard on these engines when you start them up and they're already, boom, at full speed. Okay? So that's it, though. That's basically the differences between your typical lawn tractor and a garden tractor. This happens to be an upper end lawn tractor, but still, you can see the differences. Front axle, transmission, engine, capacity, okay, deck size, right? Same deal here. Deck size, engine size, transmission size, fuel capacity. But that's going to be the main things on it, really. Engine and transmission. Much heavier duty, much more stout. Alright? If anybody wanted to add something that I forgot, please do so. Go ahead and leave a comment down below letting me know, or whatever you'd like to say. Give me the thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe. But that's the video on the differences between the two, since I've got one sitting here. I don't have garden tractors often. I mess usually with lawn tractors, but got one that came in. This one, it's all coming down to this gas tank. I've got someone who might have one for me, and if I can get it at a decent enough price, the unit may be saved. And then I still have to pull the deck out and see for sure, but the way it looks right now, if I can get this fixed, which I have an arm, we might be back in business. Otherwise, you're going to be seeing me tearing this unit down. Front to back, everything's coming off of it. Before I tear it down, I'm pulling this cover and getting this mouse nest out of here so this engine's clean and ready to be used or sold or whatever I'm going to do with it. I wish it had its sticker that said it was 22 horsepower. So if I went to sell it, they knew. It only says it there. But anyway, that's getting off topic. So that's the difference between the two, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.